Well, the Jaffa Orange's film, I mean, Jaffa, the Orange's Clockwork, is kind of a political essay about the construction of the imagery of Palestine and Israel, the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through its iconography and through its graphic appearance. In fact, I took the orange, the Jaffa orange, which exists in Palestine since 11th century, but was started to be commercialized in the 19th century. I take it as a device. And in fact, what I did is to return to the archives from the very origin of the imagery of Palestine, from the invention of photography until advertising, and trying to deconstruct both the discursive image and the ideological political discourse which is behind the imagery. The title, The Orange's Clockwork, comes while working on editing of the film. In fact, we were working with a working title, which was a story of a brand name. And while working on the material, we started to realize two things. First of all, this connotation to the idea of the mechanic construction of the image, which is more reference to Walter Benjamin essay on photography. So there was this idea of the mechanics of the building of the image. And secondly, because we're talking about question of the use of the image as a weapon and the idea of the violence, which is both behind the image and the violence of colonialism. So on one hand, the inspiration of the essay on violence, which is Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick, and the mechanics of the image, which is from Walter Benjamin. And it was found, the title was found, in fact, by my editor, which I'm working in the last 15 years. And at a certain moment she said, well, in fact, it's La Mécanique des Oranges, which is translated in English to Orange's Clockwork, which is the inversion of Kubrick's title. I think that I'm privileged. I mean, the fact that I'm already in the last more than 20 years making documentaries, and I had some documentaries which were successful both in terms of broadcasting around the world and in audience films that were shown theatrically. I think that for me it was much more easy to put up the co-production than for younger filmmakers. Many of my films were co-produced by Belgium or were broadcast on Belgium TV. So, in fact, it was easier with Belgium, with Germany, which are countries that I'm working usually, than it was, for example, with France. In Israel, it was an independent production company that was that is funded by private finance, and it was thanks to a friend that she's a producer that she put up the co-production. So the difficulties was the fact that usually you can get a co-production when you bring your own national money, but because I refused to take Israeli national money, it was more complicated for my co-producer, but these were the conditions. And in fact, I cannot complain because it's a big co-production. There is both Canada and Switzerland, Belgium is a major country, France, Israel. So I wouldn't complain about my production conditions. The form of a film, I mean, the cinematographic approach of a film for me, for many years, has to be linked directly to the subject. I mean, it's not just an aesthetical choice to come and to show to people, to show to my interviewees films that I'm broadcasting on the walls of their houses, offices, or whatever, or giving to them pictures in hand that inspire them. if we think about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the image of Palestine-Israel, we could say that it's a projection, it's a mental projection. And in fact, what they wanted is to transform this mental projection into a physical projection and to project on the walls of the people and then to give them the possibility to project on the projection. So from there it came. I wanted to speak about image, about build-up of image. So the two ideas was, I'm not asking questions, I'm giving to see, and the images are asking the questions and the people are reacting to those images. First of all, the question of a subjective and non-subjective film, for me, it's a broader issue of principle. I don't know what's an objective film. I know only what subjectivity and the insistence of subjectivity for me, it's the only real reason to make any artwork whatsoever. I mean, objective work is the way that power relates to discourse, to artistical discourse. So if my film would have been an objective film, I think that it would have been a big problem. And the subjectivity, it's an insistence, it's a choice, and anyway, each one of us have his own point of view. This would make the richness of humanity. It's the fact that it's the accumulation of subjectivities and not objectivities. So this is on the principle level. The starting point is to admit that we're talking about a colonial conflict. And a colonial conflict means that it belongs or it is part of the history of colonialism, which all what it means colonialism. It's a build-up of identity, it's the colonization. It's a build-up of identity, it's the colonization of space, land, image, etc., etc. So this is my point of view. My point of view is to deal with it as a colonial conflict. And the subtext of colonialism, if we oppose to it, it's decolonization. So the film is between those two ideas, between colonization and the possibility of decolonization. On the very personal level, I'm belonging to this part of the Israeli society which is the most privileged part of the Israeli society, which means that I'm a Jew and I'm a Western Jew, and this gives me the privilege of full freedom of speech and action. So my choice many years ago to leave Israel and to come to Europe, it's self-imposed exile, and this is the reality of my relation to the space where I'm living in, which is the European space and Israel. And I think that in those two spaces, I'm exiled. I'm in exile when I'm here, and I'm in political exile when I'm there. So this is the relation. The relation, it's a question of exile. The relation between Europe and Israel, I think that it's a very broad and large issue, which is difficult to reduce and to resume to few sentences. But in fact, if we think about it, I think that the big paradox between Europe and Israel is the fact that if we think that the history of the Jews in Europe, it's the history of their discrimination, the history of their impossibility to fully integrate the European space, the paradox of Israel is that since the creation of Israel, I mean, since the moment that the Jews are on the other side of the Mediterranean, suddenly they are accepted as European. We are playing football in the European Cup, and we are part of the OECD, and we are singing in the Eurovision, which this is, for me, it's the big European paradox. It's now that we are on the other side, we are considered as white, while we were here In Europe, we were not considered a part of the white. And I think that this is also the way that Europe looks at Israel. It looks at it as, on one hand, as a European state, as something which is an extension of Europe, and in the other hand, it's Europe continued to have the attitude towards Israel, which was the historical attitude towards the Jews, which is a status of exception. Yesterday, it was a status of exception by negative discrimination, and today it's a status of exception by positive discrimination, but in fact, the principle of exception never left Europe.